I'm standing on my front porch, sipping a mug of black coffee that's frankly a little too hot for a humid Virginia morning, watching a scene that brings a tear to my eye. It's not a tear of sadness, mind you. It's a tear of pure, unadulterated artistic satisfaction. Across the street, a woman is weeping. She's not crying because of a tragedy, or a lost love, or a physical injury. She's crying because a man in a cheap polyester suit just handed her a stack of legal documents thick enough to choke a horse. That woman is Patricia "Patty" Pringle, the president of the Whispering Oaks Homeowners Association, and she is currently realizing that her little suburban fiefdom has just been annexed by the United States Department of Justice. I didn't set out to destroy a neighborhood's economy. I didn't want to be the guy who caused property values to dip temporarily while lawyers picked the carcass of the association clean. All I wanted was for my dog to be able to pee in his own backyard without a tribunal being called. But they started it. Specifically, Patty started it. And if there is one thing the United States Marine Corps taught me during my 20 years of service, it's that you never start a fight, but you absolutely, positively finish it with overwhelming force. Let's rewind the clock about 8 weeks, back to when I still had hope for humanity and a clean credit score. I had just retired. 20 years of crawling through mud, eating MREs that tasted like cardboard and despair, and sleeping in places that would make a dumpster look like the Ritz-Carlton. I was done. My knees sounded like a bag of marbles when I walked. My back had a permanent ache, and my tolerance for bureaucracy was in the negative integers. I had a nice pension, a bit of money saved up from some private contracting work I did post-service, and a desire for quiet. That's all I wanted. Quiet. So I bought a house in Whispering Oaks. On paper, it was perfect. It was a gated community in Northern Virginia, close enough to D.C. that I could get to the VA hospital if I needed to, but far enough out that I couldn't hear the highway. The brochure showed smiling families, manicured lawns that looked like they were cut with laser precision, and a sense of safety. It looked like the kind of place where nothing ever happened. That appealed to me. I was tired of things happening. I pulled up in the moving truck on a Tuesday. I didn't hire movers because I don't like people touching my stuff, and frankly, I need the exercise. Sitting in the passenger seat next to me was Atlas. Now, let me tell you about Atlas. Atlas is a Rottweiler, but calling Atlas a dog is like calling a tank a car. He is 110 pounds of muscle, big blocky head, and soulful brown eyes. To the uneducated observer, he looks like a creature bred to guard the gates of the underworld. To anyone who actually knows him, he is a medically necessary teddy bear. I have PTSD. I don't broadcast it. I don't wear a t-shirt about it, but it's there. Crowded spaces, sudden noises, people coming up behind me, it makes my brain short-circuit. Atlas is trained to handle that. He performs tasks like blocking, where he stands behind me in line to create personal space. He does room checks. He applies deep pressure therapy when my heart rate spikes. He is a legitimate, task-trained service animal under the Americans with Disabilities Act. He is also a good boy. The best boy. We pulled into the driveway. The house was nice. Brick front, 2 stories, big oak tree in the yard. I put the truck in park and looked at Atlas. "We made it, buddy," I said. "Civilization." Atlas yawned, a sound that started as a squeak and ended as a groan, and licked the dashboard. I hopped out of the cab and stretched. The neighborhood was silent. Eerie silent. It was 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, so most people were at work, but there wasn't even a bird chirping. It was like the air itself was under an NDA. I walked around to the back of the truck to open the ramp. I was wrestling with the latch, which was rusted and stubborn, when I heard the distinct sound of electric whining. It sounded like a golf cart. I turned around. Rolling silently down the street was a white golf cart with a flashing amber light on top. It stopped exactly parallel to my driveway. The driver didn't get out immediately. She sat there for a moment, adjusting the rearview mirror, checking her lipstick. She was a woman in her late 50s, wearing a floral blouse that was aggressively bright, white capri pants, and a visor. She had a clipboard. Nothing good ever comes from a person holding a clipboard in a residential neighborhood. She stepped out of the cart. She didn't walk. She marched. She had the posture of a drill sergeant, but the energy of a dissatisfied customer at a deli counter. She walked right up to the edge of my driveway, but didn't cross onto the concrete, as if an invisible force field separated my property from the street. "Good morning," I said, trying to be neighborly. "I'm Mike, just moving in." She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She looked at the moving truck. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at the oil stain on the driveway that was there when I bought the house. "The previous owners didn't scrub that," she said. Her voice was high, nasally, and carried the tone of someone who has never been told no in her entire life. "It's a violation of Section 8, Paragraph 3 of the Community Standards. Oil stains must be remediated within 24 hours. I blinked. "Okay, nice to meet you too. I'll get some kitty litter on it once I unpack." She made a note on her clipboard, a violent, scratching check mark. "I'm Patricia Pringle, president of the HOA. We like to maintain a certain caliber of aesthetic here in Whispering Oaks." "I can see that," I said. "Place looks great." "We work hard to keep it that way," she said, narrowing, her eyes at my truck. "Commercial vehicles are not permitted to be parked overnight. You have until 6 p.m. to remove that monstrosity." "It's a rental," I said, keeping my cool. "I'm unloading it today. It'll be gone by dinner." "See that it is?" she said. She turned to leave. At that exact moment, Atlas decided he needed to stretch his legs. I had left the passenger door open. He jumped down. 110 pounds of black and tan dog landed on the pavement with a heavy thud. He shook himself, his collar jingling, and looked at Patty. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just looked at her with mild curiosity, probably wondering if she had any cheese in her pocket. Patty froze. Her eyes went wide. She actually gasped, clutching her clipboard to her chest like a shield. "What?" she whispered, pointing a shaking finger. "Is that?" "That's Atlas," I said, walking over and patting his massive head. "He's my dog." "That is not a dog," Patty screeched. "That is a beast, a wolf." She took a step back, nearly tripping over her own feet. "We have strict rules. Strict! Bylaw 4.2 clearly states no dogs over 40 pounds, and absolutely no aggressive breeds. No pit bulls, no Dobermans, no Rottweilers." She practically spat the word Rottweiler like it was a curse word. "He's not aggressive," I said, my voice dropping an octave. This was the part I hated. Explaining my medical history to a stranger in floral print. "And the weight limit doesn't apply to him. Atlas is a service animal." Patty let out a laugh. It was a dry, hacking sound. "Oh, please, don't try that with me. Everyone tries that. Oh, it's my emotional support peacock. It's my anxiety iguana. We don't do that here. This isn't California. We follow the rules." "He's not an emotional support animal," I said firmly. "He is a task-trained service dog, required for a disability. He is protected under the ADA and the Fair Housing Act. Federal law overrides your bylaws, Ms. Pringle." Patty's face turned a shade of red that matched the stop sign on the corner. She stepped forward, encroaching on my driveway now. Listen to me, Buster. You might think you can waltz in here with your moving truck and your monster dog and quote laws at me, but you are mistaken. The Whispering Oaks Homeowners Association Handbook is a binding contract. You signed it at closing. I signed an acknowledgement of the covenants, I said. Those covenants cannot violate federal law. We'll see about that, she snapped. She pointed her pen at Atlas. That thing is a liability. It looks dangerous. Look at its jaws. If that animal is not gone by 5:00 p.m. today, I will have animal control here to seize it as a stray and a public nuisance, and I will fine you $500 per day for every day he remains on the premises. I felt the old familiar heat rising in my chest. It wasn't anger exactly. It was focus. It was the feeling you get right before you breach a door. The world slowed down. I looked at Patty. I looked at her stupid visor. I looked at her golf cart. Patty, I said, very quietly, do not call animal control. Do not fine me. I will send the management company my documentation this afternoon. It's a letter from my doctor and his vaccination records. That is all you are legally entitled to. Leave my dog alone. 5:00 p.m., she yelled, marching back to her cart. Or I call the police. She gunned the electric engine and sped off at a blistering top speed of 12 miles per hour. I stood there for a minute, watching her go. Atlas nudged my hand with his wet nose. I looked down at him. Well, buddy, I sighed, I think we found the enemy. I spent the rest of the day unloading boxes with a kind of mechanical fury. I put the couch in the living room. I set up my bed. I built the dog crate. Every time I walked out to the truck, I felt eyes on me. I looked around and saw curtains twitching in the windows of the neighbors' houses. Patty had clearly spread the word. The new guy was trouble. The new guy had brought a monster into the sanctuary. At 4:30 p.m., I sat down at my laptop using the hotspot on my phone because the internet guy wasn't coming until Thursday. I drafted a professional, polite email to the property management company listed on my welcome packet. I attached a copy of a letter from my psychiatrist stating I required a service animal. I attached Atlas's rabies certificate. I attached a photo of him sleeping with a stuffed duck to show he wasn't a demon from hell. Subject: Service Animal Documentation, 124 Maple Drive. To whom it may concern, please find attached the documentation for my service animal, Atlas. As discussed with Ms. Pringle earlier today, Atlas is a task-trained service dog and is essential for my medical needs. Per the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, he is exempt from breed and weight restrictions outlined in the HOA bylaws. I look forward to being a quiet and respectful neighbor. Sincerely, Michael. Last name. I hit send. I thought that would be it. I thought surely there is a lawyer somewhere in the chain of command at this management company who will look at this, see service dog, see ADA, and tell Patty to stand down. That's how the world works, right? Logic prevails? I checked my watch. 5:00 p.m. At 5:05 p.m., a car rolled up. It wasn't animal control. It was a private security sedan. A guy in a uniform that looked like it was bought at a Halloween store got out. He walked up my driveway and taped an envelope to my front door. He didn't knock. He just taped it and ran back to his car like he was dropping a grenade. I walked out and ripped the envelope off the door. It was on thick, cream-colored stationery with the Whispering Oaks logo. An oak tree whispering, I guess? Notice of violation. Resident, Michael, last name. Violation. Possession of prohibited breed. Rottweiler, possession of animal exceeding 40 yelps. Fine, $500. Remedy: immediate removal of animal. Additional note: the board has reviewed your email sent at 4:30 p.m. The board does not recognize psychiatric service animals for breeds categorized as inherently dangerous by the association. Your request for accommodation is denied. You have 24 hours to remove the animal, or further fines and legal action will be taken. I stared at the paper. They denied it. They actually put it in writing. They looked at a federal law and said, "Nah, we don't do that here." I walked back into the kitchen. The house was empty, echoing, just me and the dog. Atlas was chewing on a Kong toy, blissfully unaware that he was illegal. I picked up my phone. I could have called a lawyer right then. I probably should have. But I'm a stubborn man. And I'm a man who believes in giving people enough rope to hang themselves. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "You want to play by the book? Let's play." The next morning, the harassment began in earnest. I woke up to Atlas whining. I let him out into the backyard. My yard wasn't fenced yet. That was on the to-do list for next week, so I went out with him on a leash. It was 6:00 a.m. The sun was just coming up. It was beautiful. Then I saw her. Patty was standing on the sidewalk. She wasn't alone. She was with a man who looked like he was made entirely of dough and beige clothing. He had a camera with a telephoto lens that was frankly creepy. "That's him!" Patty shouted, pointing. "Document it, Harold! The beast is defecating on the lawn!" "It's my lawn!" I yelled back. "He's pooping in his own yard!" Harold snapped photos. Click, click, click. "That is an unauthorized discharge of biological waste!" Patty screamed. "That is a health hazard! Bylaw 9, Section C." I stood there in my sweatpants and t-shirt, holding a bag of dog poop, staring at these two lunatics. Atlas finished his business and looked at them, tilting his head. "You're trespassing if you step on the grass," I warned. "I am on the public sidewalk," Patty crowed. "I am monitoring compliance. You have not removed the animal." "And I'm not going to," I said. "Read the email I sent." "I read it," she shouted. "It's garbage. I looked up your doctor. He's from the VA. That's government nonsense. We have our own standards. You think you can just come in here and intimidate us with your war dog?" War dog. That struck a nerve. Atlas wasn't a war dog. He was a washout from a protection program because he was too friendly. He'd sooner lick an intruder to death than bite them. But Patty didn't see a dog. She saw a symbol of something she couldn't control. "Go home, Patty," I said, turning around, "before I file a harassment complaint." "I am the president," she screamed at my back. "I am the complaint department." By noon, I had 3 more fines stuck to my door. $100 for unkempt lawn. I had been there for 24 hours. $200 for aggressive behavior towards a board member. I told her to go home. $500 for unauthorized livestock. Livestock? Really? I sat at my kitchen island looking at the mounting pile of paper. I realized that arguing with Patty was like wrestling a pig in the mud. You both get dirty, but the pig likes it. She enjoyed this. This was her hobby. She probably had a scrapbook of people she'd evicted. I needed a wall. I needed a physical barrier between me and the madness. And I needed it fast. I pulled up Google and searched for fence contractors no HOA nonsense. I found a guy named Big Tony's Fortifications and Fences. The website was just a picture of a brick wall and a phone number. It was perfect. I called the number. "Tony's," a voice answered. It sounded like he was gargling gravel. "Yeah, this is Mike. I just moved into Whispering Oaks. I need a fence, a big one, ideally yesterday." There was a pause. "Whispering Oaks? You mean Patty Pringle's North Korea? That's the one. Tony chuckled. It was a dark, rumbling sound. I hate that woman. She tried to find my truck for being too yellow last year. I'll be there in an hour. Bring the heavy equipment, I said. Buddy, Tony said, I'm gonna bring the apocalypse. I hung up the phone and looked at Atlas. We're going to build a castle, buddy, and we're going to make them watch. But I knew a fence wasn't going to stop the legal assault. I needed to document everything. I went to my moving boxes and dug out my old GoPro and a dash cam I hadn't installed yet. I mounted the dash cam in the front window facing the street. I clipped the GoPro to my belt. If Patty wanted a show, I was going to film the pilot episode. Little did I know, she was planning something much worse than fines. She was planning to weaponize the police. If you have never been the target of a suburban paper terrorist, consider yourself lucky. It is a specific kind of psychological warfare that relies on the weaponization of the mundane. In a war zone, you worry about IEDs and snipers. In Whispering Oaks, you worry about Scotch tape and Times New Roman font. For the next 3 days, my front door looked less like an entrance to a home and more like a community bulletin board for the insane. Patty didn't just send one fine a day. Oh no. She was operating on a shock and awe doctrine. She came in waves. I would wake up. Tape rip, a yellow slip. I would come back from walking Atlas, on the street, avoiding the grass like it was lava. Tape rip, a pink slip. I would check the mail. A formal letter, certified, return receipt requested. Let's review the highlights of the Blitz, shall we? Violation 402, improper window treatments. The fine, $7,500. The reality, I hadn't unpacked my curtains yet, so I had temporarily taped a black garbage bag over the bedroom window so I didn't flash the neighborhood while changing. Tacky? Maybe. Illegal? According to Patty, it was a blight on the visual harmony of the streetscape. Violation. 409, excessive noise. The fine, $150. The reality, I dropped a toolbox in my garage at 2:00 p.m. on a Wednesday. Apparently, the echo was disturbing the peace. Violation number 415. Unauthorized commercial activity. The fine, $300. The reality, an Amazon delivery driver parked in front of my house for 30 seconds to drop off dog food. Patty claimed I was running a warehouse, but the pièce de résistance was the daily recurring fine for Atlas. Every morning, like clockwork, a $500 ticket for prohibited dangerous animal appeared. By Friday, according to the Whispering Oaks accounting department, which I strongly suspected was just Patty and a solar-powered calculator, I owed the association nearly $4,000. I didn't pay a dime. Instead, I went to Office Depot. I bought a 3-ring binder, a 3-hole punch, and a pack of dividers. I labeled the binder the Patty file. Every ticket, every letter, every grainy photo she took of me was punched, filed, and dated. I wasn't just hoarding trash. I was building a discovery file for a lawsuit I hadn't even filed yet. But paper wasn't going to keep Patty's eyes off my property. I needed physical cover. I needed Big Tony. Big Tony rolled up on Saturday morning. You know how some people look like their dogs? Tony looked like his truck. He drove a Ford F-350 with dual rear wheels, a lift kit, and a bumper that could probably breach the Pentagon. The truck was a violently bright shade of yellow, like safety vest yellow. Tony himself was about 6'4", shaped like a vending machine, with forearms the size of my thighs. He stepped out of the truck, hiked up his tool belt, and spat a sunflower seed onto the asphalt. He looked at my house. Then he looked at the house across the street, Patty's house, and shook his head. "So," Tony rumbled as I walked out to meet him, "you're the fresh meat." "I prefer new resident," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was like a bench vise. "But yeah, I'm Mike." "I'm Tony. I heard about the dog," he said, nodding toward the front window where Atlas was watching us, looking like a gargoyle. "She tried to take him yet?" "She threatened to call animal control." Tony laughed. "Classic Pringle. She called the cops on me last summer because my crew was listening to classic rock. Said Led Zeppelin was satanic worship music. She's got too much time and not enough soul." "I need a fence, Tony. I need a privacy fence. 6 feet high, board on board, no gaps. I don't want to see her, and I don't want her seeing me." Tony scratched his chin, the sound like sandpaper on wood. "All right, here's the kicker. The HOA handbook, which I have unfortunately memorized, says fences have to be open style, split rail or wrought iron. They want the open space aesthetic. They don't allow privacy fences unless you have a pool." "I don't have a pool," I said. "Right," Tony said. "But the county code says you can build a privacy fence up to 7 feet without a permit if it's for safety. And since you have a dangerous animal, according to her—" He grinned, revealing a gold tooth. "You're actually required by county law to secure the animal. If we follow the HOA rules, we're violating the county dangerous dog ordinance. If we follow the county, we violate the HOA." "Which one wins?" I asked. "The county," Tony said. "Every time. But she'll sue you anyway." "You cool with that?" "Tony," I said, "I'm counting on it." "I like you, Mike," Tony said. He walked back to his truck and pulled out a sledgehammer. "Let's make some noise." Construction began immediately. And when I say Big Tony brought the apocalypse, I wasn't kidding. He didn't just bring a shovel. He brought a Bobcat skid steer loader. He brought a crew of 4 guys who moved with the efficiency of a pit crew. They started ripping up the sod along the property line. The sound of the diesel engine roaring and the thump-thump-thump of the post-hole digger was music to my ears. It was the sound of progress. It was also the sound of a declaration of war. It took exactly 14 minutes for the golf cart to appear. I timed it. I was standing on the porch, drinking water, watching Tony operate the Bobcat. He was digging a hole for the corner post, right on the edge of the property line facing Patty's house. The white golf cart careened around the corner on 2 wheels. Patty was driving. In the passenger seat was a man I hadn't met yet, a thin, nervous-looking guy holding a notepad. This was probably the Architecture Review Committee, ARC, which I assumed was just Patty's drinking buddy. Patty slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt right in front of the Bobcat. Tony didn't stop. He just stared at her through the safety cage of the machine and revved the engine. "Stop!" Patty screamed. She literally jumped out of the moving cart. "Cease and desist! Stop this madness!" Tony powered down the Bobcat. The sudden silence was deafening. The birds even stopped chirping. "Morning, Patty," Tony said, leaning out of the cab. "Lovely day for a dig." "Tony," she hissed, "I banned you from this community. You are on the blacklist." "I'm on the public street, Patty," Tony said, gesturing to his truck. "And right now I'm working on private property. Mike's property." Patty spun around to face me. She marched up the driveway, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. She was wearing a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on it today. She was in official uniform. "You!" She pointed a finger at my chest. "You did not submit an ARC application. You cannot build a fence without board approval. This is an unauthorized structure. You have to stop immediately." I tapped the GoPro clipped to my belt. The little red light blinked. Actually, Patty, I said calmly, I'm mitigating a safety hazard. You told me my dog was dangerous. You told me he was a liability. The county requiring me to secure any animal deemed dangerous behind a 6-foot barrier. I'm just complying with your assessment. I didn't tell you to build a wall, she shrieked. I told you to get rid of the dog. This monstrosity will block the sight lines. It will ruin the open feel of the neighborhood. I will not allow it. The posts are going in, Patty, I said. Tony, keep digging. Tony fired the engine back up. Vroom! Patty looked like she was going to have a stroke. She turned to the nervous guy with the notepad. Write this down, Jerry. Willful noncompliance. Destruction of community aesthetic. And call the police. Tell them we have a trespassing contractor. Patty, I said, stepping closer to her so I didn't have to shout over the engine. If you call the police, tell them to bring a surveyor, because if you step 1 foot onto where Tony is digging, you're trespassing. I have a right to inspect, she yelled. The bylaws grant the board right of entry to inspect violations. The Constitution grants me the right to tell you to get off my lawn, I retorted. And right now you're standing on my grass. Get off. She stared at me. For a second, I thought she was going to swing at me. Her hands were balled into fists at her sides. She was shaking. This was a woman who had likely never been told what to do in 20 years. She was the queen of this anthill, and I was pouring boiling water down the entrance. You will regret this, she whispered. It was actually scarier than the screaming. I will put a lien on this house so fast your head will spin. You will never be able to sell. You will be buried in legal fees. I will bankrupt you, you arrogant little man. I smiled, a genuine, happy smile. Did you catch that, camera? I asked, looking down at my chest. Patty's eyes flicked to the GoPro. She realized she'd just threatened me. She stiffened, straightened her polo shirt, and turned on her heel. Come on, Jerry, she snapped. We have paperwork to file. They retreated to the golf cart and drove off. She's a charmer, ain't she? Tony yelled over the engine. She's a national treasure, I said. Bury those posts deep, Tony. I want this fence to survive a nuclear blast. Boss, Tony said, I'm using enough concrete to anchor a battleship. This fence ain't going nowhere. By the end of the day, the posts were set. It looked like Stonehenge in my backyard. A perimeter of pressure-treated 4x4s standing silent vigil. The fence wasn't finished. The pickets needed to go up the next day, but the boundary was drawn. That night, I sat on my back porch with Atlas. The yard was a mess of dirt and construction debris, but for the first time, it felt like mine. We're digging in, buddy, I told him. Atlas leaned against my leg, his heavy weight grounding me. I checked my email. There was already a notification from the HOA portal. Emergency board meeting agenda. Sanctions against 124 Maple Drive. They weren't wasting time. Neither was I. I spent the evening uploading the day's footage to the cloud. I backed it up on 2 hard drives. I labeled the folder Patty's Meltdown. I was feeling good. I was feeling like I had won the skirmish, but I made a rookie mistake. I underestimated the enemy. I assumed Patty would stick to fines and threats. I assumed she had a line she wouldn't cross. I was wrong. The next day was Sunday. Tony's crew wasn't working. It was quiet. I decided to take Atlas for a walk around the block. I put on his service vest, the red one that says Service Dog, Do Not Pet in big white letters. I clipped on his heavy-duty leather leash. We walked out the front door. The neighborhood was alive. People were washing cars, kids were riding bikes. As we walked down the sidewalk, the activity stopped. People stared. It was like the scene in a western where the gunslinger walks into the saloon. I kept my head up, looking straight ahead. Heel, I whispered. Atlas was glued to my left leg, his movement synchronized with mine. He was perfect. We rounded the corner near the community park. That's when I saw her. Patty was watering a flower bed near the terrifying "Welcome to Whispering Oaks" sign. She saw us coming. She didn't retreat. She didn't glare. She put down the hose. She wiped her hands on her pants, and she stepped directly onto the narrow sidewalk, blocking our path. She stood there, arms crossed, waiting. I had two choices. I could walk onto the street to go around her, or I could stop. I stopped about 10 feet away. "Excuse me," I said. "Please move." "This is a private sidewalk," she said, "for residents in good standing. You are not in good standing. I own a house here. I'm a resident. Move." "Make me," she said. It was such a childish taunt that it took me a moment to process it. She was baiting me. She wanted me to get angry. She wanted me to yell. Or better yet, she wanted the dog to react. I tightened my grip on the leash. "Atlas, sit." Atlas sat. He looked at Patty. He let out a huff. "See?" she said, her voice rising so the neighbors could hear. "It's aggressive. It's staring me down. I feel threatened." "He's sitting, Patty. He's doing literally nothing." "He's a killer," she shouted. "I can see it in his eyes." And then she did the unthinkable. She lunged. She threw herself forward, not at me, but at the space between us. She flailed her arms, let out a scream that sounded like a banshee caught in a wood chipper, and threw herself onto the manicured grass next to the sidewalk. "Help!" she screamed. "Help me! It attacked me! The dog attacked me!" I stood there, frozen in sheer disbelief. Atlas hadn't moved. He hadn't even flinched. He was just watching this woman roll around on the grass, clutching her ankle. "Help! He bit me! Call 911!" Doors opened. People came running. A mom with a stroller froze. A guy washing his car dropped his sponge and ran over. "Oh my God, Patty!" The guy yelled. "Are you okay?" "He set the dog on me," Patty sobbed, squeezing out fake tears. "He told it to kill me." The neighbor looked at me with horror. "Dude, what is wrong with you?" "I didn't do anything," I said, holding my hands up. "The dog didn't touch her. She just fell." "Liar," Patty shrieked. "Look at my ankle. It's broken. I can feel it." "Call the police," someone yelled. "I'm calling them," another neighbor shouted, phone already to their ear. I looked down at Atlas. He looked up at me, confused by the noise. I looked at my chest. The GoPro. I had forgotten to turn it on. My heart stopped. I pressed the button frantically. Beep, beep, beep. It was recording now, but it hadn't recorded the fall. It hadn't recorded the lunge. I had the dashcam in the house. I had the cameras on the porch. But here? Around the corner? I was blind. I looked at Patty, who was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance of a woman in agony. She looked up at me through her fake tears, and for a split second the mask slipped. She grinned, a small, wicked, triumphant grin. She knew. She knew I didn't have a camera on me. I heard sirens in the distance. The wail was getting louder. "Stay calm," I told myself. "Stay calm." But as the blue lights flickered against the trees and the police cruisers turned onto the street, screeching to a halt, I felt a pit open in my stomach. This wasn't a zoning dispute anymore. This was assault. This was a criminal charge. And if they determined Atlas was dangerous, they would take him. Two officers stepped out of the first car, hands on their holsters. "Back away from the dog!" one of them shouted. I raised my hands. "He's a service dog. He's safe." "Hands up! Step away from the animal!" I looked at Atlas. Stay, I whispered. My voice cracked. Stay. I stepped back. The officer moved in, hand hovering over his gun. Patty wailed louder. "He tried to kill me!" she screamed. I stood there, surrounded by hostile neighbors, facing down 2 cops, with the HOA president framing me for assault. And all I could think was, I am going to destroy this woman. If it's the last thing I do on this earth, I am going to destroy her. But first, I had to survive the next 10 minutes. The officer looked at me. He looked at Atlas. He looked at Patty. "Okay," the officer said, his voice hard. "Everyone shut up. You—" He pointed at me. "ID, now!" I reached for my wallet slowly. This was it. The moment where it all went south. Or so I thought. Because what Patty didn't know, and what I had forgotten in the panic, was that modern technology is everywhere. As I handed the officer my license, a teenage kid, maybe 16, wearing a hoodie, walked up from the park bench where he'd been sitting. He was holding an iPhone. Officer?" the kid said. His voice cracked. The cop turned. "Not now, son." "I think you want to see this," the kid said, holding up his phone. "I was filming a TikTok. I got the whole thing in the background." Patty stopped wailing instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, sudden, and absolutely delicious. "You got it on video?" the officer asked. "Yeah," the kid said, smirking at Patty. "That lady is crazy. She just dived. The dog was literally sitting down." I felt the air rush back into my lungs. I looked at Patty. Her face had gone pale white. The war wasn't over. But the battle? The battle had just turned. The air in Whispering Oaks is usually filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and entitlement. But in that moment, as the teenage kid, let's call him the savior of suburbia, held out his iPhone, the air was thick with the smell of roasted Karen. Officer Miller, the older of the 2 cops, took the phone. He was a guy who looked like he'd seen everything and was impressed by none of it. He had a mustache that violated several fashion laws, but commanded respect. Officer Gomez, the younger partner, kept his hand near his belt, still eyeing Atlas, though his posture had relaxed from shoot to kill to mildly apprehensive. "Let's see what we got here," Miller grunted. He tapped the screen. We all huddled around. Me, Miller, Gomez, and the kid. Patty stayed on the ground, clutching her ankle, wailing softly. "I can't believe he filmed me without consent," she moaned. "That's a violation of privacy, Bylaw 12. "Ma'am, you're on a public sidewalk screaming for help," Miller said without looking up. "There is no expectation of privacy when you're creating a public disturbance. Now hush." On the tiny screen, the video played. It was a masterpiece of modern cinema. The frame was vertical, naturally. It showed me and Atlas standing still. You could clearly hear me say, "He's sitting, Patty." Then you saw Patty. She looked left, looked right, took a deep breath, and then threw herself forward with the grace of a drunk ballerina. It was undeniable. She didn't trip. She didn't stumble. She launched. Her feet actually left the ground. She landed with a thump, rolled twice, and immediately grabbed her ankle. In the video, Atlas watched the whole thing. At the moment of impact, he literally yawned. Miller watched it once. He watched it twice. He looked at Gomez. Gomez was biting his lip, trying very hard not to laugh. Miller handed the phone back to the kid. "Can you airdrop that to me, son?" "Sure thing," the kid said, looking way too pleased with himself. Miller walked over to Patty. She was still on the ground, but the wailing had stopped. She was looking at him with big, hopeful eyes. "Officer," she said, her voice trembling. "You saw it? You saw the beast lunge?" "Ms. Pringle," Miller said, his voice flat. "Get up." I can't. My ankle. It's shattered." "Your ankle is fine," Miller said. "And if you don't stand up in the next 5 seconds, I'm going to have to make a very difficult decision about whether to charge you with filing a false police report." The color drained from Patty's face so fast, I thought she was going to faint for real. "Excuse me." "I saw the video," Miller said, looming over her. "The dog didn't move. You dove. That's a Class 1 misdemeanor in the Commonwealth of Virginia. False report of a crime. Up to 12 months in jail and a $2,500 fine." Patty's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. She looked at the neighbors who had gathered. The mom with the stroller. The guy with the car sponge. They were all staring at her. The sympathy had evaporated, replaced by that unique mix of embarrassment and fascination you get when watching a public meltdown. I must have tripped," she stammered, scrambling to her feet. Miraculously, her shattered ankle seemed to heal instantly. "I was startled. The dog startled me. It was a psychological attack." "Uh-huh," Miller said. He hitched up his belt. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home. You're going to leave this gentleman and his dog alone. If we get called out here again, and I find out you're harassing him, you're taking a ride in the back of my car. Do we understand each other?" Patty straightened her polo shirt. She tried to summon some of her old authority, but it was like trying to inflate a popped tire. "This isn't over. The HOA has its own tribunal. We don't need police to enforce community standards. If your community standards involve faking assaults, you might want to rethink them," Gomez added, finally speaking up. Patty glared at me. If looks could kill, I'd be a pile of ash. "You think you're smart," she hissed. "But you just made an enemy of the entire board." "Walk away, Patty," Miller warned. She turned and limped away. Fake limping, I noted. Back toward her house. The crowd parted for her like she was radioactive. The guy with the car sponge walked up to me. "Hey man, sorry I yelled at you. I really thought she was hurt." "It's okay," I said, my heart rate finally starting to drop. "She's good at what she does." "She's a menace," the guy whispered. "She fined me for having the wrong color mulch last week. Just watch your back." I nodded and turned to the kid. "What's your name?" "Tyler," he said, spinning his phone in his hand. "Tyler, you just saved my life. Seriously. If you hadn't been here—" I trailed off. I didn't want to think about what would have happened. "No worries," Tyler shrugged. "She yelled at me for skateboarding on my own driveway yesterday. Said the wheels were damaging the asphalt aesthetic. She sucks." "Can you send that video to me too?" I asked. "Already did," he grinned. "And I posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group. It's got like 50 comments already." I laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. "You're a legend, Tyler." The cops gave me a nod. "Nice dog," Miller said, looking at Atlas. "My brother has a Roddy. Big babies." "The biggest," I agreed. They got back in their cruiser and drove off. I stood there on the sidewalk, the adrenaline crash hitting me like a physical weight. My hands started to shake. I looked down at Atlas. He nudged my knee. "Let's go home, buddy," I whispered. We walked back to the house. The fence posts stood like sentinels in the backyard. I went inside, locked the door, and sat on the floor with my back against it. I pulled Atlas into a hug. He tolerated it, licking my ear. I had won the battle. The police were on my side. The neighbors knew she was a liar. But I knew Patty Pringle. I had met officers like her in the military, the ones who cared more about shiny boots than the safety of their platoon. They don't stop when they're wrong. They double down. They scorch the earth. I was right. The escalation didn't take days. It took hours. By that evening, the email arrived. It was sent to the entire community mailing list, but the subject line made it clear who it was really for. Urgent. Emergency board meeting. Date, tomorrow, 7:00 p.m. Location, the clubhouse. Agenda, discussion of immediate removal of dangerous residents and review of legal enforcement options regarding 124 Maple Drive. She wasn't hiding it anymore. She was calling a public execution. I clicked on the attachment. It was a formal agenda. Item 1. Review of incident on 5/15. Discussion of aggressive behavior by resident Michael. Last name. Item 2. Vote to levy maximum fines, $100 per day, retroactive to move in. Item 3. Vote to initiate foreclosure proceedings for unpaid fines and violation of restrictive covenants. Item 4. Discussion of ban on aggressive breeds, with 0 exceptions. Foreclosure. She was going to try to take my house. I sat there, staring at the screen. My blood ran cold. Can an HOA actually foreclose on your house because they don't like your dog? I did what any rational person would do. I spent 4 hours on Google. The answer was a terrifying maybe. In Virginia, HOAs have a lot of power. If they lien you for unpaid fines and you don't pay, they can, theoretically, force a sale to recoup the debt. It's rare, it's extreme, and it takes a long time. But it's possible. And Patty Pringle seemed like the kind of woman who would spend the association's entire budget just to prove a point. My phone rang. It was Big Tony. "Hey, boss," Tony said. "You okay? My cousin lives on your street. Said the cops were there." "Yeah, Patty staged a dive. Tried to frame the dog." "Classic," Tony snorted. "Listen, I'm seeing some chatter on the contractor grapevine. Patty's been calling around. She's trying to find someone to come remove an illegal structure tomorrow." "The fence?" "Yeah. She wants to demo the posts while we're not there." "Can she do that?" "Legally? No. Physically? If she finds a guy desperate enough for cash? Maybe. But here's the thing. I'm going to park my skid steer in front of the gate tonight. If she wants to touch those posts, she's going to have to move. 4 tons of yellow steel." "Tony," I said, "I love you." "I know. Everyone does. I'll see you at 7 a.m. to put the pickets up. We're finishing this wall tomorrow, come hell or high water. Or Patty." I hung up. I had a fortress being built. I had video evidence. But I needed legal firepower. I couldn't represent myself in this. I knew how to shoot a rifle, not a subpoena. I needed a shark. I remembered a guy my old platoon sergeant used to talk about. A lawyer in D.C. who handled veteran disability cases. A guy who sued the VA for fun. His name was Saul. Not that Saul, but close enough. I looked him up. Saul Verdugo, civil rights attorney. The website was black and red. The slogan was, "They trampled your rights. We trample their bank accounts." I sent an inquiry through the contact form. Message: HOA, denying ADA service dog. Harassment. False police report. Threatening foreclosure. I have video. I got a reply 3 minutes later. It was 9:00 p.m. on a Sunday. Reply: come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bring the dog. I slept fitfully that night. I dreamed of giant gavels smashing my house. The next morning, Tony and his crew arrived like a cavalry charge. The sound of nail guns firing was the rhythm of my morning. Pop, pop, pop. Pickets were going up. The wall was becoming real. Patty didn't show her face. No golf cart, no clipboard. She was huddling in her bunker, preparing for the meeting. I put Atlas in the car and drove into the city. Saul Verdugo's office was not in a strip mall. It was in a glass tower in downtown D.C., overlooking the Potomac. The receptionist took one look at Atlas, smiled, and buzzed us in. Saul was a small man. He wore a suit that cost more than my first car. He had slicked back hair and eyes that looked like they could scan a barcode from across the room. "Mike," he said, shaking my hand. He didn't look at me. He looked at Atlas. "And this is the defendant?" "This is Atlas." Saul knelt down. Atlas licked his face. Saul laughed. "Oh yeah, a real killer. I can see why the HOA is terrified. He might drown them in slobber." He stood up and walked behind his massive mahogany desk. "Sit down. Tell me everything. Don't leave out the part where she faked the injury. I live for that stuff." I laid it all out. The move-in, the fines, the thug dog comment, the denial of the email, the incident with the cops, the foreclosure threat. Saul listened. He didn't take notes. He just steepled his fingers. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. "Mike," he said softly, "do you know what the Fair Housing Act says about discrimination against disability? That it's illegal?" "It's not just illegal," Saul said, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming. "It's expensive. And do you know what the Department of Justice thinks about HOAs that try to supersede federal law? They don't like it? They treat it like a blood sport," Saul smiled. It was a shark's smile. "Here's the thing. Most lawyers would tell you to send a cease and desist letter. They'd say, 'Let's settle this amicably.' I am not most lawyers." He pulled a file out of his drawer. "They put it in writing," Saul said, tapping the printout of the email I had forwarded him. "They explicitly stated they do not recognize the ADA. That is a confession. That is a smoking gun. That is beautiful." "So what do we do?" I asked. "Do we sue them?" "Not yet," Saul said. "We let them hang themselves. Tonight is the meeting?" "Yeah. 7:00 p.m. "Go," Saul said. "Do not speak. Do not argue. Let them say everything they want to say. Let them vote. Let them put it in the minutes. If they vote to foreclose, even better. If they vote to evict the dog, perfect." "Why?" "Because," Saul said, "damages are calculated based on harm. The more they harass you, the more they try to take from you, the bigger the check they have to write at the end. We want them to feel invincible. We want Patty Pringle to think she has won." He handed me a small digital voice recorder. "Tape the meeting. Virginia is a one-party consent state. As long as you are part of the conversation, or the meeting is public, you can record. Get it all." "And then?" "And then," Saul said, "we unleash the Kraken. I have a contact at the DOJ Civil Rights Division. We're not just going to sue them, Mike. We're going to initiate a federal investigation." I took the recorder. "You want me to be a punching bag tonight?" "I want you to be a sponge," Saul corrected. "Soak it up. Every insult. Every threat. Let it fuel you." I drove back to Whispering Oaks, feeling a strange sense of calm. The fence was finished when I got home. It was a beautiful 7-foot wall of cedar. I couldn't see Patty's house. It was glorious. I fed Atlas. I put on a clean shirt. I walked to the clubhouse. The parking lot was full. It seemed the entire neighborhood had turned out for the show. I walked into the meeting room. It was set up like a courtroom. A long table at the front for the board. Rows of folding chairs for the peasants. Patty sat in the center. She was wearing a neck brace. I almost laughed out loud. A neck brace. For an ankle injury, that didn't happen. She was committing to the bit. I took a seat in the back row. The room went silent. Heads turned. Whispers started. "That's him," someone hissed. "The guy with the wolf." "I heard he pushed her," another whispered. "No, I saw the video on Facebook," a third person murmured. "She faked it." Patty banged a gavel. Yes, she had a gavel. "Order!" she screeched. "This emergency meeting of the Whispering Oaks HOA is now in session." She glared at me over the top of her neck brace. "We are here to address the crisis at 124 Maple Drive. The flagrant disregard for our rules. The unauthorized construction of a prison wall in a residential zone. And the presence of a dangerous, vicious animal that has already caused physical harm to the board president." She touched, her neck gingerly. "The board has drafted a resolution," she continued. "Resolution 2025A. The immediate remediation of nuisance. It calls for the daily fining of the homeowner in the amount of $1,000 until the animal is removed. It calls for the immediate removal of the illegal fence, and it authorizes the board to place a lien on the property to cover the medical expenses of the president." She looked at the other 4 board members. They looked nervous. One of them, a guy named Jerry, looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. "Patty," Jerry said quietly, "are we sure about the medical expenses? I mean, the video was doctored," Patty snapped. "I have a doctor's note. I have whiplash." "Is there any discussion?" Patty asked, looking at the audience. I sat there. I felt the recorder buzzing in my pocket. Let them hang themselves. "I have a comment." A woman in the front row stood up. It was the woman from the golf cart, Patty's friend. "I don't feel safe. That dog is huge. What if it eats a child? We have to protect our property values." "Exactly," Patty said. "We are protecting the community. All in favor of Resolution 2025A?" 3 hands went up immediately. Patty and 2 cronies. Jerry hesitated. He looked at me. He looked at Patty. "Jerry!" Patty barked. Jerry slowly raised his hand. "The motion passes unanimously," Patty declared, slamming the gavel. She looked directly at me. A smile crept across her face, creepy and triumphant. "Mr. Last Name," she said, "you have received your notice. You have 24 hours to remove the animal. If you do not, we will begin legal proceedings to foreclose on your home to pay your debts to this association. Do you have anything to say?" I stood up. The room held its breath. I looked at Patty. I looked at the board. I looked at the terrified neighbors. "No, Patty," I said calmly. "I think you've said enough." I turned and walked out. "That's right. Run away," she shouted after me. "You can't win! The HOA always wins!" I walked out into the cool night air. I pulled the recorder out of my pocket and pressed stop. The HOA always wins. "Not this time," I muttered. I called Saul. "They did it," I said. "They voted to fine, to remove the fence, and to foreclose, and she's claiming medical expenses for whiplash." "Whiplash," Saul chuckled. "From a fall where she landed on her ankle. Brilliant. Mike, go get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow morning we file." "File the lawsuit?" "No," Saul said. "Tomorrow morning I call the DOJ. We're going nuclear." The sun rose on Monday morning over Whispering Oaks, illuminating the dew on the grass and the fresh, bright yellow notice taped to my front door. It was a notice of hearing for foreclosure proceedings. Patty Pringle didn't sleep. She didn't rest. She was fueled by the dark energy of bureaucratic malice. The notice stated that a compliance hearing was scheduled for Thursday evening. This was the formal step required by Virginia law before they could legally put a lien on my house and start the foreclosure process. It was a kangaroo court, a formality where they would nod, pretend to listen, and then drop the guillotine. I took a picture of the notice and texted it to Saul. Me. They're moving fast. Hearing is Thursday. Saul. Good. Don't reply. Just show up. Come to my office first. I spent the next 3 days in a state of zen-like calm. It's a trick I learned in the service. When you know the airstrike is coming, you don't panic. You just make sure your coordinates are correct. Big Tony finished the fence on Tuesday. It was a masterpiece. 7 feet of solid red cedar, capped with a lattice that was technically decorative, but really just added another 6 inches of height. The gate was reinforced with steel. When Tony latched it shut, the thunk sounded like a bank vault closing. She's been driving by every hour, Tony told me as he packed up his truck. Slowing down, taking pictures. She's staring at the wood like she's trying to set it on fire with her mind. Let her stare, I said, handing Tony a check. She can't see inside anymore. You be careful, Mike, Tony said, looking serious for the first time. I've seen these HOA people ruin lives. They've got nothing better to do. You have a job? A life? They don't. This is their life. They will outweight you. They won't outweight this, I said. Thursday arrived. I put on a suit. Not my military dress blues. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing my medals, but a sharp, charcoal gray suit. I groomed my beard. I put on my tie. I looked like a defendant, which is exactly what they wanted. I drove into D.C. to meet Saul. Saul was in his office, surrounded by stacks of paper. He had the Patty file open on his desk. You look like you're going to a funeral, Saul said, spinning a pen in his fingers. Ideally, hers, I muttered. Metaphorically, Mike. Metaphorically. Saul grinned. Okay, here's the game plan. Tonight is the trap. The trap? The law requires that before you can file a discrimination suit with the DOJ, you have to show a pattern of refusal to accommodate. We have the email, we have the fines, but we need one final, undeniable moment where they look the law in the face and spit on it. He handed me a single sheet of paper. This is a formal request for reasonable accommodation under the Fair Housing Act. It cites the specific statutes. It offers a compromise. You will pay the fines for the window treatment and the noise, but they must waive the fines regarding the dog and the fence, as both are medical necessities. The fence is a medical necessity? For the dog's safety. Absolutely, Saul winked. If they sign this, the war is over. You pay a few $100, you keep the dog, life goes on. They won't sign it. I know. Saul's smile widened, revealing teeth that looked very sharp. That's the point. When they refuse this specific document, which is drafted to be incredibly reasonable, they are proving bad faith. They are proving that this isn't about rules. It's about targeting you. And that distinction is the difference between a slap on the wrist and a federal civil rights violation. So I go in there, I offer peace, and when they shoot me, you nuke them. Exactly. I'll be in the car. I can't go in with you. HOA hearings usually ban lawyers to keep the community feel, but I'll be listening. He tapped the wire he had set up on my phone. I drove back to the clubhouse. It was 7:00 p.m. The clubhouse library was dimly lit. The hearing committee was just the board again. Patty, still in the neck brace, Jerry, the nervous one, and 3 other cronies who looked like they were carved out of dried apples. They sat behind a long oak table. A single wooden chair was placed in the center of the room, facing them. It looked like an interrogation room from a bad spy movie. "Mr. Last Name," Patty said. Her voice was icy. "Please sit." I sat. I placed my hands on my knees. I looked at them. "This is a compliance hearing," Patty read from a script. "You have been charged with multiple violations of the master deed and bylaws, specifically the harboring of a dangerous animal, the construction of an unapproved structure, and failure to pay assessments totaling," she checked a calculator, $4,800. She looked up. "Do you dispute these charges?" "I dispute the validity of the charges regarding the service animal and the fence," I said calmly. "The board has already ruled on the animal," Patty snapped. "It is a Rottweiler. It is over 40 pounds. It is banned." "And I am telling you," I said, keeping my voice steady, "that under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act, a service animal is not a pet. It is not subject to breed restrictions or weight limits. You cannot ban him." "We can do whatever we want," the man to Patty's right said. His name was Bob. He wore a sweater vest and looked like he hated fun. "This is a private corporation. We have a contract." "Federal law supersedes private contracts, Bob," I said. "Don't lecture us." Patty slammed her hand on the table. "You are arrogant. You think because you were in the military or whatever that you can just do what you want. Well, not here. Here, I am the commander-in-chief." I reached into my jacket pocket. The board members flinched, as if I were pulling a weapon. I pulled out the single sheet of paper Saul had given me. "I am authorized to make you a settlement offer," I said. I slid the paper across the table. Patty picked it up like it was a dirty diaper. She read it. Her eyes narrowed. "You want us to waive the fines?" She laughed, a high, incredulous laugh. "You want us to let the beast stay? And the wall?" "It is a formal request for reasonable accommodation," I said. "If you sign that, I will drop my counterclaims. We can all go back to being neighbors." Patty looked at the paper. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at Jerry. "Jerry, look at this," she sneered. "He's begging." Jerry looked at the paper. "Patty, it cites federal codes. Maybe we should show this to the HOA attorney?" "We don't need a lawyer to tell us how to run our neighborhood." Patty ripped the paper out of Jerry's hands. She stood up. She held the paper in both hands. "Mr. Last Name," she said, staring into my eyes. "The Whispering Oaks Homeowners Association does not negotiate with terrorists." And then, in slow motion, she ripped the paper in half. Rip. Then she ripped it again. "Your request is denied," she said, throwing the confetti pieces at me. "The fines stand, the foreclosure proceeds. You have 30 days to vacate the property before we auction it." I looked at the torn paper on the floor. I looked at Patty's triumphant face. She thought she had just won the Battle of Midway. "Is that your final decision?" I asked. "For the record?" "For the record," she hissed. "Get out. And take your monster with you." I stood up. I didn't say a word. I turned around and walked out of the library. I walked out to the parking lot where Saul's black sedan was waiting. I got in the passenger seat. Saul was wearing headphones. He took them off slowly. His face was a mixture of shock and pure, unadulterated joy. "Did she?" Saul whispered. "Did she actually say, 'We don't negotiate with terrorists,' while ripping up a federal housing document?" "She did," I said. Saul let out a breath. "That was poetic. That was the stupidest thing I have ever heard a human being say on tape." He pulled out his phone. "Okay, Mike, go home. Hug your dog. I'm making a call." "Who are you calling?" "The Department of Justice. Civil Rights Division, Saul said, dialing a number. I used to date the assistant deputy chief. She owes me a favor and she hates HOAs. I went home. I felt a strange weightlessness. The hammer had dropped. Now we just had to wait for the explosion. But Patty wasn't done. Of course she wasn't done. The next morning, Friday, I woke up to the sound of a chainsaw. I jumped out of bed, threw on shorts, and ran to the back window. There were 3 men in the alleyway behind my house, the easement that ran between my property and the next street. They were wearing reflective vests, but they weren't utility workers. They looked like day laborers. One of them had a chainsaw. He was cutting into my fence. "Hey!" I roared, throwing the back door open. Atlas barked, a deep, booming sound that shook the windows. I sprinted across the yard. The guy with the chainsaw stopped, looking startled. The saw was idling. He had already cut a jagged gash into the beautiful cedar wood. Patty was standing safely behind them, on the public easement. "Keep cutting," she screamed at the men. "It's an illegal structure on an easement. Cut it down." "Get sawed." "Away from my fence!" I yelled, reaching the wall. I grabbed the top of the fence and pulled myself up so I could look over. "This is HOA property," Patty yelled. "The easement belongs to us. You encroached 2 inches. Tear it down." "I have a survey," I shouted back. "The fence is 6 inches inside my line. If you touch this fence again, I will call the police and have you arrested for destruction of property." The guy with the chainsaw looked at Patty, then at me, then at the 110-pound Rottweiler who was now standing next to the fence, vibrating with a low growl. "Lady," the chainsaw guy said, "you didn't say there was a dog, and you didn't say the guy was home." "I am paying you to cut," Patty shrieked. "Cut it." "Nah," the guy said. He killed the engine. "I ain't going to jail for a fence dispute, and I ain't getting eaten." He turned and walked away. The other 2 guys followed him. "Cowards!" Patty screamed. "You're all cowards!" She turned to me. Her face was purple. The neck brace was crooked. "I will come back," she vowed. "I will come back with a bulldozer. I will flatten this house." "Patty," I said, my voice dangerously low, "go home. Look at your email." "What?" "Check your email, Patty." She blinked. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. She tapped the screen. I watched her face. I watched the color drain out of it. I watched her hand start to shake. Saul had worked fast. What is this?" she whispered. "That," I said, "is a notification of investigation from the United States Department of Justice. You're being investigated for systematic discrimination and violation of the Fair Housing Act." "The government?" She looked up, her eyes wide. "This is a local matter. The government doesn't care about Whispering Oaks." "Oh, they care," I said. "They care a lot. You're not fighting me anymore, Patty. You're fighting the United States of America." She stared at her phone. She looked at the gash in the fence. She looked at me. For the first time, I saw fear. Real fear. Not the fake fear she used to manipulate cops. The fear of someone who realizes they have woken a sleeping dragon. She didn't say another word. She turned and walked away, forgetting to limp. I looked at the cut in the fence. It was ugly, but the wall held. I went back inside and called Saul. "She got the email," I said. "That wasn't the email," Saul laughed. "That was just the courtesy copy of the complaint filing. The real fun starts on Monday." "What happens Monday?" "Monday," Saul said, "is when the investigators arrive. And Mike, these aren't the guys who inspect for termites. These are the guys who prosecute hate crimes and banks." The weekend passed in a blur of tension. I patched the fence. I walked Atlas. The neighborhood was quiet, but it was the quiet before a storm. I saw neighbors gathering in small groups on driveways, whispering. The rumor mill was churning. Mike sued the HOA. The feds are coming, out he went. Dark. No fines. No emails. Her house looked abandoned. Monday morning, 9:00 a.m. I was drinking coffee on my porch. A black SUV with government plates turned onto the street. Then another. Then a third. They didn't drive fast. They drove with the slow, terrifying purpose of a bureaucracy that has unlimited time and unlimited budget. They pulled up to the curb. Doors opened. Men and women in sharp suits stepped out. They had badges on their belts. They had briefcases. One of them, a woman with glasses and a demeanor that could freeze water, walked up to my driveway. "Mr. Last name?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Special Agent Henderson, Department of Justice, Housing and Civil Enforcement Section. We received your complaint." She looked at Atlas, who was sleeping by the door. "Is that the dog in question?" "Yes, ma'am. That's Atlas." She looked at the house across the street, Patty's house. "And that is the residence of Ms. Patricia Pringle?" "It is." Agent Henderson adjusted her glasses. "We're going to need to ask you a few questions, and then we're going to have a very long conversation with Ms. Pringle." She turned to her team. "All right, let's get started. Pull the files. I want to see every fine, every lien, and every denial issued by this board in the last 5 years." I watched them swarm. It was beautiful. Patty Pringle had wanted a war. She had wanted to use the rules to crush me. She forgot one thing. There is always a bigger rule book. If you have never seen a federal civil rights investigation up close, let me paint a picture for you. It isn't like the movies. There are no SWAT teams kicking down doors, no helicopters, no dramatic arrests in the rain. It is far, far worse. It is the weaponization of boredom. It is the tactical deployment of forensic accountants and paralegals. It is a slow, grinding machine that consumes paper and spits out ruin. For the next week, Whispering Oaks ceased to be a quiet, suburban enclave and became a field office for the Department of Justice. The black SUVs were parked in a neat row. Men and women in suits walked door to door, flashing badges and asking polite, terrifying questions. Patty Pringle tried to stop them on day one. I was watching from my window, my favorite pastime these days. Agent Henderson was standing by her vehicle, organizing a stack of files. Patty drove up in her golf cart. She looked haggard. The neck brace was gone, replaced by a look of frantic desperation. "You can't park here!" Patty screeched, pulling up to the bumper of the government Tahoe. "This is a private street. These are private parking spots designated for residents only." Agent Henderson didn't even look up from her file. "We are conducting an official federal investigation, ma'am. We are authorized to park where necessary." "I am the president of this association," Patty yelled, stepping out of the cart. "I did not authorize this. You are trespassing. I will have these vehicles towed." Agent Henderson finally looked up. She took off her glasses. She looked at Patty with the kind of pity you usually reserve for a bug you're about to squash. "Ms. Pringle," Henderson said, her voice smooth and cold, "if you touch a federal vehicle, or if you call a tow truck to interfere with a federal investigation, I will have you arrested for obstruction of justice." Title 18, United States Code, Section 1505. Do you want to go to federal prison today, or do you want to move your golf cart? Patty froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the badge on Henderson's belt. She looked at the other agents who had stopped what they were doing to watch. She got back in her golf cart. She put it in reverse. She backed away slowly, defeated. That was the moment the neighborhood smelled blood. Once the residents realized Patty was powerless, that she couldn't fine them for talking to the feds, the floodgates opened. It turns out I wasn't the only victim. I was just the first one loud enough to bring down the thunder. Agent Henderson set up a temporary interview room in the clubhouse, the same room where Patty had ripped up my settlement offer. Now, it was a confessional. I sat with Saul in his office later that week, getting the updates. Saul was giddy. He was reading the summary reports like they were love letters. "Mike, you are not going to believe this," Saul said, flipping a page. "They found a family 3 streets over, the Nguyen's. Patty fined them $2,000 last year for cooking smells. She explicitly listed foreign spices as a nuisance in the violation notice." "Oof," I said. "That's bad." "It gets better," Saul said. "There's a family with an autistic son. They wanted to put up a sensory swing in their backyard, behind a fence. Patty denied it because it looked industrial. Then she fined them for unauthorized play equipment every day the kid used it. She's a monster." "She's a gold mine," Saul corrected. "This establishes a clear pattern of discrimination based on race and disability. But here is the kicker. They seized the HOA laptop. The one Jerry uses. The one Patty uses," Saul smiled. "And guess what they found in a folder labeled Problem Residents? I'm afraid to ask." "Spreadsheets," Saul whispered. "Detailed spreadsheets rating residents on compliance and desirability. She had a column for ethnicity. She had a column for political signs. She had notes, Mike. Notes like, likely to move if pressured, and cannot afford legal counsel." I felt a chill go down my spine. She was targeting people she knew couldn't fight back. "Exactly," Saul said, "until she met you. She thought you were just another guy with a dog. She didn't know you were the grenade that would blow up the bunker." The investigation culminated in the deposition. This was the main event. The DOJ lawyers summoned Patty and the entire board to a conference room in D.C. to testify under oath. I wasn't allowed in the room, but Saul was there as my counsel, since I was the intervening plaintiff. He recounted the entire thing to me afterwards over beers. I will recreate it here to the best of my ability, because it deserves to be etched in history. The scene, a sterile conference room. The players, Patty Pringle, defiant, angry, wearing a floral blazer. Barry, the HOA's lawyer, a guy who usually handles slip and fall cases at grocery stores. He looked like he wanted to cry. The prosecutor, a DOJ shark named Mr. Sterling, young, sharp, and utterly merciless. The transcript, as recounted by Saul. Sterling. "Ms. Pringle, you stated in your email to Mr. last name that the board does not recognize the Americans with Disabilities Act. Is that correct?" Patty. "That was taken out of context." Sterling. "It was a 1-sentence email. The sentence was, 'The board does not recognize psychiatric service animals or the ADA in this community.' What is the context, Ms. Pringle?" Patty. "The context is that we are a private community. We have standards. If we let one person break the rules, everyone will do it. People will be bringing ponies into their living rooms. We have to hold the line." Sterling. "So you believe your homeowners association bylaws supersede federal civil rights law?" Patty. "In Whispering Oaks?" "Yes. We signed a contract. He signed the book. That book is the law." Barry, HOA lawyer, whispering. "Patty, stop talking. Please stop talking." Patty. "No, Barry. He needs to understand. This isn't just a neighborhood, it's a lifestyle. And that man is a disruptor. He brought a war dog into a family community. He built a spite fence. Sterling, let's talk about the fence. You hired 3 laborers to destroy a fence on private property without a court order. Is that correct? Patty, it was on the easement. Sterling, we have the survey. It was not. You attempted to destroy private property to harass a disabled veteran. Why? Patty, because he wouldn't listen. He wouldn't submit. I am the president. When I speak, it is the voice of the community. Sterling pauses, looks at a document. Ms. Pringle, are you aware of the Fair Housing Act's penalties for retaliation? Patty, I didn't retaliate. I enforced the rules. Sterling, you called an emergency meeting to foreclose on his home 24 hours after he provided video evidence clearing him of a false assault charge. You don't call that retaliation? Patty, I call that justice. He humiliated me. He made me look like a fool on Facebook. Sterling, so the foreclosure was personal? Patty, it was. It was necessary to restore order. Barry put his head in his hands. Sterling, one last thing. We have a recording of the hearing on Thursday night. In it, you are heard saying, the Whispering Oaks Homeowners Association does not negotiate with terrorists. Who is the terrorist in this scenario, Ms. Pringle? Patty, him, the man who refuses to cut his grass. To 2.5 inches. The man who brings a beast into our zip code. He is terrorizing our property values. Sterling, no further questions. Saul told me that when they walked out of that room, Barry the lawyer looked like he had aged 10 years. He grabbed Patty by the arm and hissed, "You just admitted to willful discrimination, retaliation, and intent to harm on the record. Do you have any idea what you just did?" Patty pulled her arm away. I stood up for us, Barry. Someone had to. She still didn't get it. She thought she was Joan of Arc. She didn't realize she was the captain of the Titanic, and she had just steered directly into the iceberg. The impact happened 3 days later. It came in the form of a letter. Not from the DOJ, but from the HOA's insurance company. See, every HOA carries directors and officers, D&O liability insurance. This pays for lawyers if the board gets sued. It protects the personal assets of the board members. But there is a clause, a very important clause. It's called the Intentional Illegal Acts Exclusion. Basically, the insurance company says, we will protect you if you make a mistake. We will not protect you if you break the law on purpose. Saul called me at 10:00 a.m. on Friday. It happened, Saul said. His voice was trembling with laughter. The insurance carrier sent a reservation of rights letter. They are denying coverage. What does that mean? It means, Saul said, that the insurance company watched the deposition. They saw Patty admit that she ignored federal law on purpose. They said, nope, we aren't paying for this. They are dropping the defense. So who pays for the lawyer? Who pays the damages? The HOA, Saul said, directly from the funds. And if the funds run out, the board members are personally liable. Personally? Personally. Their houses, their cars, their retirement accounts. Patty Pringle is on the hook for everything. The news hit the board like a nuclear bomb. Jerry, the nervous board member, showed up at my door an hour later. He looked like a man on the run. He was sweating. He was holding a fruit basket. Mr. Last name, Jerry stammered, holding out the basket. Mike, can I call you Mike? I looked at the basket. It had a pineapple in it. What do you want, Jerry? I just wanted to say that I never agreed with her, Jerry pleaded. You know that, right? I was pressured. She's a bully. I voted yes because I was scared she'd come after me next. You voted to foreclose on my house, Jerry. I know, I'm sorry, I'm resigning. I sent my letter today, look. He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. I resigned. Please, tell your lawyer not to take my house. I have 2 kids in college. Jerry, I said, leaning against the doorframe. It's out of my hands. It's federal now. She lied to us, Jerry cried. She told us the insurance would cover everything. She said we were untouchable. Now they're saying we could lose everything. Bob resigned too. And Susan, everyone is quitting. It's just Patty left. Patty is all alone? She's locked in her house, Jerry whispered. She won't answer the door. I think she's shredding documents, but the feds already took the computer. I took the fruit basket. Thanks for the pineapple, Jerry. Good luck. I closed the door. I walked to the window. Across the street, Patty's house was dark. The curtains were drawn tight. Her golf cart sat in the driveway, looking forlorn. The Queen was in her castle, but the walls were crumbling. The DOJ didn't just want a settlement. They wanted an example. They expedited the case. Because Patty had admitted everything on tape, there was no need for a long trial. It was a summary judgment motion. The judge, a federal judge who had zero patience for suburban tyranny, issued a preliminary ruling. Immediate injunction. The HOA was ordered to cease all fines and harassment of me and Atlas immediately. Monitor appointed. The court appointed a third-party monitor to take over the HOA's operations. Patty was stripped of her powers instantly. Damages. Hearing. A date was set to determine how much money the HOA and Patty owed me. But before we could even get to the damages hearing, the HOA collapsed. With 4 board members resigning, the association had no leadership. The management company, seeing the writing on the wall, terminated their contract. The bank froze the HOA's accounts pending the lawsuit. The neighborhood fell into chaos. The trash wasn't picked up. The HOA paid for private waste removal. The streetlights flickered out. The landscaping crew stopped coming. And everyone knew who was to blame. It wasn't me. On Saturday morning, a handwritten sign appeared on the community message board near the entrance. Due to the illegal actions of Patricia Pringle, the HOA is insolvent. Trash service suspended. The mob formed quickly. I was in my backyard playing fetch with Atlas when I heard the shouting. I walked to the front gate. A group of about 30 neighbors had gathered on Patty's lawn. They weren't holding pitchforks, but they were holding trash bags. "Come out, Patty!" someone yelled. "You owe us for the trash pickup. You bankrupt the neighborhood. Come out!" I watched from behind my fence. It was a revolution. The peasants had stormed the palace. Patty's front door opened a crack. She peeked out. She looked terrifying. Her hair was unkempt. She was wearing a bathrobe. She looked like a deposed dictator. "Get off my property!" she screamed. "I will fine you all. Trespassing. Bylaw 14. "There is no Bylaw 14 anymore, Patty," a neighbor shouted back. "There is no board. You destroyed it." "I was protecting you," she shrieked. "I was saving the aesthetic." "You cost us our liability insurance," another neighbor yelled. "My realtor told me I can't sell my house because the HOA is under federal investigation. You tanked our property values." That was the magic phrase. Property values. In the suburbs, that is the holy grail. You can insult someone's mother, but don't touch their zestimate. Patty slammed the door. The crowd threw the trash bags onto her lawn. A pile of white plastic garbage bags began to grow on her pristine, manicured grass. It was poetic justice. The woman who obsessed over cleanliness was now buried in the neighborhood's refuse. I went back inside. I poured a coffee. I petted Atlas. "You hear that, buddy?" I asked him. Atlas thumped his tail. "That," I said, "is the sound of victory." But the financial hammer hadn't even dropped yet. That was coming next. And when it hit, it wouldn't just be trash bags on the lawn. It would be a crater where the HOA's bank account used to be. The wheels of justice grind slow, but the cash register of justice rings loud. 3 months after the trash bag revolution, I sat in a courtroom. It wasn't the small, wood-paneled room of the local county court. It was the federal district court in Alexandria. The ceilings were high, the flags were big, and the judge looked like he ate gravel for breakfast. We were there for the damages hearing. The liability phase was over. The judge had already ruled that the Whispering Oaks HOA had violated the Fair Housing Act, the ADA, and probably the Geneva Convention, if you looked hard enough. Now the only question was, how much was this going to cost them? Patty Pringle was there. She looked diminished. The floral blazer was gone, replaced by a somber gray cardigan. She sat at the defendant's table alone. No high-priced insurance lawyer, just a court-appointed trustee who was technically representing the now bankrupt HOA, and Patty representing herself because she couldn't afford private counsel anymore. Saul stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He just walked to the podium and laid a spreadsheet on the judge's bench. "Your Honor," Saul said, "the plaintiff seeks compensatory damages for emotional distress, loss of enjoyment of property, and harassment. We seek punitive damages to punish the willful and malicious conduct of the defendant, and, as provided by statute, we seek full reimbursement of legal fees." The judge, Judge Holloway, put on his reading glasses. He looked at the numbers. He looked at Patty. "Ms. Pringle," the judge said, "do you have any assets to declare on behalf of the association?" Patty stood up. Her hands were shaking. "Your Honor, the association has $12,000 in the reserve fund. That's all. We need that for the pool maintenance." Judge Holloway stared at her. "Ms. Pringle, the pool is the least of your concerns. You are facing a judgment that exceeds your total assets by a factor of 40. He banged his gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "I find for the plaintiff," Holloway announced, "compensatory damages, $75,000, punitive damages, $200,000, legal fees awarded to Mr. Verdugo, $145,000, civil penalties payable to the United States Treasury, $50,000. He paused to let the math sink in. "Total judgment against the Whispering Oaks Homeowners Association, $470,000. Patty gasped. A literal, audible gasp. She grabbed the table for support. "But we don't have that money," she cried. "We're a non-profit. We just mow the grass." "Then I suggest you find it," Judge Holloway said, closing his folder. "Or I will authorize the U.S. Marshals to seize the association's assets. And if the association cannot pay due to your willful misconduct, Ms. Pringle, the plaintiff is free to pursue you personally for the punitive portion." He looked at me. "Mr. Last Name, I hope this brings you some closure, and give the dog a treat for me." "I will, Your Honor." We walked out of the courthouse. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. And I was legally entitled to $500,000 from the people who tried to evict my dog. "So," I asked Saul on the courthouse steps, "how do we actually collect? You said they have 12 grand. Saul lit a cigar. He wasn't supposed to smoke on federal property, but nobody stopped him. "This is the best part, Mike," Saul grinned through a cloud of smoke. "Since the HOA has no money, they have to declare Chapter 11 bankruptcy to restructure the debt. But the debt doesn't vanish. The debt belongs to the corporation. And who is the corporation? The homeowners, Saul said. The shareholders. To pay off the judgment and exit bankruptcy, the court-appointed trustee is going to issue a special assessment. Every single house in Whispering Oaks is about to get a bill for their share of Patty's war. How much? There are 100 homes, Saul calculated. 470 grand, plus the trustees' fees, plus interest, rounded up to 5 grand, maybe 6. $6,000 per house? Due in 30 days, Saul nodded. Or they get a lien put on their houses. I whistled. They are going to eat her alive. Get the popcorn, Mike, Saul said. The real show is just starting. The letter arrived 2 weeks later. It was on official bankruptcy court stationery. It was sent to every mailbox in Whispering Oaks, including mine. Yes, I had to pay a share of my own settlement, which was ironic, but Saul said I'd get it back in the final payout. I stood by my mailbox and watched as the neighbors got home from work. It was like watching a synchronized swimming routine of despair. Car pulls up, neighbor gets out, opens mailbox, rips open envelope, read, freeze, look at Patty's house, scream. One guy, a quiet accountant named Dave, who lived 2 doors down, literally threw the letter on the ground and stomped on it. The Facebook group, which had been dormant since the trash incident, exploded. Subject: $500 assessment? Comment 1. Is this a joke? I don't have $5,000. Comment 2. It says if we don't pay by the 1st, they lien our deeds. Comment 3. This is because of Pringle. She told us. Insurance would cover it. Comment 4. I'm losing my vacation fund for this? Comment 5. We need a meeting now. The trustee, a no-nonsense bankruptcy lawyer named Mr. Crenshaw, called a mandatory creditor meeting at the clubhouse for Saturday morning. It was standing room only. I walked in with Atlas. I didn't have to bring him, but I felt he deserved to be there. He was the plaintiff, after all. The mood in the room was ugly. It wasn't the polite tension of the first meeting. This was the angry, desperate energy of people whose bank accounts had been raided. Patty was there. She sat in the front row, staring at the floor. She looked small. Mr. Crenshaw stood at the podium. He didn't use a gavel. He used a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, settle down," Crenshaw said. His voice was bored. He did this for a living. "I am the court-appointed trustee for the Whispering Oaks HOA. My job is to liquidate assets and satisfy creditors so that this corporation can be dissolved or restructured." "Why do we have to pay?" a woman shouted. "We didn't sue anyone." "You are members of the corporation," Crenshaw explained. "The corporation incurred a debt. The corporation has no assets. Therefore, the members are liable. The judgment is $470,000. Divided by 100 homes plus administrative costs, the assessment is $5,500 per household." "But insurance!" Dave the accountant yelled. "We pay premiums. Why didn't they pay?" Crenshaw looked at his notes. The insurance carrier denied coverage under the intentional acts exclusion. The board, specifically the president, was found to have acted with willful malice and intentional disregard for federal law. Insurance does not cover crimes or intentional torts. The room turned to look at Patty. If stairs had weight, she would have been crushed into a diamond. "She told us we were safe," a man in the back screamed. "She lied." Patty stood up. She turned to face the crowd. She looked like a cornered rat. "I didn't lie," she shrilled. Her voice was cracking. "I was fighting for our standards, for our property values. If I hadn't fought him," she pointed a shaking finger at me, "our neighborhood would have gone to the dogs. Literally." "You cost me $5,000, Dave yelled, walking toward her. "I don't care about the damn dog, I care about my kid's tuition." "It's his fault," Patty screamed, pointing at me again. "He's the one who sued. Blame him. He's the greedy one." The room went quiet. They looked at me. I stood up. I was holding Atlas's leash. I looked calm. I felt calm. "I didn't want to sue," I said. My voice carried easily in the silent room. "I asked for a reasonable accommodation. I sent an email. Patty denied it. I built a fence. Patty tried to tear it down. I offered a settlement. I offered to pay the fines if she just let me be. Do you remember what she did with that settlement offer?" I looked at Jerry, the former board member. "Jerry," I said, "tell them what she did with the settlement offer." Jerry stood up. He looked at Patty, then at the crowd. "She ripped it up," Jerry said softly. He offered to drop it. She ripped it up and said, "She said, we don't negotiate with terrorists." A murmur of disbelief went through the crowd. She called a resident a terrorist? She could have settled for zero? "Wait," I said. "I have something else." I pulled out my phone. I connected it to the clubhouse Bluetooth speaker system. I had paired it earlier while waiting. Preparation is key. "This is from the deposition," I said. "This is why your insurance didn't pay." I hit play. Patty's voice boomed through the speakers, tinny but clear. "Sterling. So the foreclosure was personal?" Patty. "It was. It was necessary to restore order." Sterling. "So you admit you ignored the Fair Housing Act because you didn't like the resident?" Patty. "I am the president. When I speak, it is the voice of the community." I paused the recording. "She admitted it," I said. "She told the feds she was doing it in your name. She said she was the voice of the community. So now the community gets the bill." I sat down. The anger in the room shifted. It physically shifted. It moved away from me, away from the situation, and focused entirely, like a laser beam, on Patricia Pringle. "You!" a woman in the front row hissed. "You did this on purpose." I, Patty stammered. "Resign!" someone shouted. "She already resigned," Dave yelled. "We need to sue her." "Yes!" the crowd roared. "Make her pay!" Mr. Crenshaw cleared his throat. "Actually," he said into the microphone, "that is an option. The association can file a cross-claim against Ms. Pringle for breach of fiduciary duty. If successful, we can attach her personal assets to pay the judgment." The room went silent again. The implication hung in the air. They could pay the $5,500, or they could take Patty's house. "Do it," Dave said. "Sue her." "Seconded," the woman yelled. "All in favor?" Crenshaw asked, looking slightly amused. Every hand in the room went up, even Jerry's. Patty looked around. She saw her friends, her neighbors, the people she had bullied for 20 years. There wasn't a single friendly face. She collapsed back into her chair and put her face in her hands. The meeting ended. I walked out with Atlas. Neighbors who used to cross the street to avoid me now gave me nods of respect. Some even reached out to pet Atlas. "Good dog," Dave mumbled as he walked past me. "He's cheaper than a lawyer." The fallout was swift and brutal. The trustee filed the lawsuit against Patty personally. Because the judgment was so clear-cut, and because her actions were so obviously outside the scope of her authority, her corporate shield didn't exist. She was personally liable for the $470,000. She didn't have $470,000. She was a retiree on a fixed income. Her only asset was her house. The pristine, two-story colonial with the perfect lawn and the president parking spot. She put it on the market 2 weeks later. But here is the final twist of the knife. The coup de grace. Because of the special assessment and the ongoing bankruptcy litigation, nobody wanted to buy a house in Whispering Oaks. The HOA disclosure packet that every buyer receives was a horror show. It listed federal judgment, bankruptcy, and pending special assessment. Buyers fled. Offers dried up. Patty's house sat on the market. The price dropped, and dropped, and dropped. She needed to sell to pay the judgment and avoid jail time for contempt of court. Long story, she tried to hide some money. The feds found it. Finally, 6 months later, she got an offer. It was a lowball offer, an insulting offer. Cash? Fast close. She had no choice. She signed. I watched the moving trucks from my porch. It was a rainy Tuesday. Patty was carrying a box of her knickknacks to her car. She looked 10 years older. She moved slowly. She looked up and saw me. I was standing behind my beautiful 7-foot government-sanctioned fence. I was drinking coffee. Atlas was sitting next to me, head high, watching her. She stared at us. There was no hate left in her eyes. Just defeat. A hollow, crushing defeat. She got in her car and drove away. She didn't look back. I walked back into my house. My phone rang. It was Saul. "Did she go?" Saul asked. "She's gone," I said. "Good," Saul said. "The check cleared, by the way. Your portion of the settlement, minus the fees, minus the special assessment you had to pay, you're netting about 30 grand. Not bad for a few months of annoyance." "It was never about the money, Saul." "I know. It was about the principle. And the dog." "Speaking of the dog," I said, "I have a question." "Shoot." "Who bought her house?" Saul laughed, a deep belly laugh that lasted a solid 10 seconds. "You're going to love this," Saul said. "You know Big Tony?" "The fence guy?" "Yeah, Big Tony. He's been looking for an investment property, a fixer-upper. He got it for a steal." "No way." "Way," Saul cackled. "He closes on Friday. He told me he's planning to paint the front door purple. And he has 3 pit bulls." I hung up the phone. I looked at Atlas. "Buddy," I said, "I think the neighborhood is finally going to have some character." The special assessment was painful, but it did something unexpected. It united the neighborhood. The old guard, Patty's cronies, were discredited and shamed. A new board was elected. The new president was Dave the accountant. His first act? He repealed the breed restrictions. His second act? He dissolved the Architectural Review Committee and replaced it with a neighborly dispute resolution potluck. The vibe changed. People started waving again. Kids played in the street. The grass grew a little longer, maybe 3 inches instead of 2.5, and nobody cared. The fear was gone. I walked Atlas down the street that evening. We passed Patty's old house. The for sale sign was gone. In the driveway, Big Tony's massive yellow truck was parked. He was on the porch, tearing down the "No Solicitors" sign with a crowbar. "Hey, Mike!" Tony yelled, waving the crowbar. "How's the view?" "Better every day, Tony," I yelled back. I continued my walk. I reached the entrance of the community. The Whispering Oaks sign was still there, but someone had planted new flowers around it. They weren't the regimented, colorless tulips Patty loved. They were wildflowers. Chaotic, colorful, and messy. They looked great. I looked down at Atlas. He trotted beside me, his tag jingling. He was just a dog. He didn't know he had toppled a tyrant. He didn't know he had changed federal case law regarding HOAs. Saul told me our case was now cited in legal textbooks. He just knew he was a good boy. "You did good, Atlas," I whispered. He looked up at me and sneezed. We turned around and walked home. My fence was waiting. My house was safe. And for the first time since I moved in, the silence of Whispering Oaks lived up to its name. It wasn't the silence of oppression. It was the silence of peace.